Just 105 days until the country votes in the midterm elections. Have you noticed how obsessed some conservatives have become with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez? She, of course, is the Democratic Socialist who won an upset victory last month, surprised everyone, in Democratic primary in New York's 14th congressional district. And the day after she won, Trump TV's Sean Hannity put up this amazing graphic lamenting her agenda with her absolutely shocking support for women's rights, fighting climate change, and supporting seniors. Ocasio-Cortez has recently been in the Midwest campaigning for progressive candidates alongside Bernie Sanders, which prompted another round of conservative hand-wringing. The conservative Fox Business Network tweeted out a portion of one speech without comment in what appeared to be a warning about these words from the scary socialist.
We will not rest until every person in this country is paid a living wage to lead a dignified life.
Chilling stuff. An editor of the conservative Daily Caller went to one of the rallies writing that she, quote, saw something truly terrifying. I saw how easy it would be as a parent to accept the idea that my children deserve health care and education. She elaborated on Trump TV this morning.
They talk about things that everybody wants, especially like if you're a parent. They talk about education for your kids, health care for your kids, the things that you want. And you know, if you're not really paying attention to how they're going to pay for it or, you know, the rest of that, it's easy to fall into that trap and say, my kids deserve this. And, you know, well, maybe the government should be responsible for helping me with that.
So what is it about this woman that has the right so worked up? What does it mean for the midterms and beyond? Joining me now, New York Times columnist Michelle Goldberg, whose latest column is headlined, Democrats are moving left, don't panic. Also with me, MSNBC contributor Sam SEDER, host of The Majority Report, and Brianna Gray, senior politics editor at The Intercept, whose latest piece is headlined, Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez went to war with partisanship in Kansas. What do you think? You're a longtime connoisseur, fetishist for conservative media, somewhere in between.
That's fair. That's fair. Look, I think there's a couple of things. One is they have spent years and years saying that Barack Obama is a secret socialist,
right.
that this person's a secret socialist. And it was the secret part that sort of created the suspicion. When it's out in the open, it becomes a lot more difficult for them to deal with.
It like scrambles the wires.
It scrambles the wires. And so then there's this other element of like, it's so irresistible. Like this, honestly, this was a formula they used with, forgive me, with gay sex.
Right.
There was a Dr. Paul Cameron who argued this. He was one of the foremost sort of anti-gay conservatives who wrote and opined that gay sex was the best sex. And therefore, it was that much more dangerous. And in some respects, that is like the same formula. Like this is so enticing.
That's right.
That you could fall into this trap of actually wanting your kids to have health care.
Think they deserve to have it.
Right. I mean...
You were in that. Did you? Am I right that you were out there? You went and covered that rally.
I went to Kansas, and you know, keeping in mind that everyone said it wasn't going to work in the Midwest, and this was a complete waste of time and a disaster. You know, the venue had to be changed the night before because it sold out within 10 hours, and something like 4,000 people showed up at this bigger venue at 1 o'clock in the afternoon on a Friday in triple-degree heat.
Yeah.
You know, that's not nothing.
That's not nothing.
And I think that
doesn't mean that Canada's going to win. By the way.
No, it doesn't. And that's of course, none of this can be, you know, reduced in that way. But I think what it shows is that there's a message that is beyond partisanship. And when she talks about wanting to implement programs that speak to human dignity, that speak to basic material needs, people hear that and people understand that who might not otherwise associate themselves with one party or the other.
That's a good point. And so it sort of goes to what the Daily Caller person was saying, right? Because she was saying, like, none of the signals were there to tell me that this is a bad thing that I shouldn't like, and I can see people being, you know, seduced by it.
Exactly.
I mean, I actually disagree that that goes beyond partisanship, right? I mean, I think you have one whole political party that has created, that genuinely does find this kind of language threatening and quasi-totalitarian and believes that, you know, first you're talking about children deserving health care, the next second you're being re-indoctrinated in FEMA camps. But I think that in as much as there are swing voters, and there are not very many swing voters anymore, you know, in an electorate this polarized, every election is a base election, but in as much as there are swing voters, they're not the kind of people that Beltway types like to pretend they are, these kind of judicious centrists, carefully considering.
Cross-pressured on the issues.
Those are the people, I think, who kind of are most motivated by appeals to their sort of basic material needs.
Let me just also say one thing here, which just to be clear. She also has a tremendous amount of distinct political talent. I mean, like, just to be clear, like, these people are not out of thin air. Like, she is very good at doing this. That doesn't just, like, that's a little beyond the message.
Without a doubt. But I mean, I don't mean to repeat myself, but I think the policy prescriptions are almost secondary. There's nothing offensive in what she's saying in terms of like people wanting their kids to have health care. But I think the idea that it is being straightforward, that is completely laid out there, speaks to the whole broader issue that, you know, politicos don't necessarily contemplate, but it's just like, basically like, do I think that person is authentic? Are they telling me what they believe? They are, and they seem to be pretty confident about it. And I think that goes a lot further than we imagine.
I think there's something to the delivery, of course, but you can't also ignore that something like 70% of all congressional candidates who are in swing districts, Democrats, who have won, ran centering health care as you know, the central policy. When I was in Kansas, I got a ride home from the airport with a 75-year-old Trump voter and her daughter. And when I asked her, you know, what she was doing, because she talked to me about how she appreciated that her grandkids could be on health care longer because of Obamacare. She appreciated that she was on Medicare and when it was all about Medicare expansion. She was concerned that both of her adult children were living at home, couldn't get a living wage, and didn't have health care. And when I explained to her that I was going to a Bernie rally, and these are the things that Bernie cared about, it didn't take but a 10-minute car ride to get her on board. And I think that you can't undervalue the fact that people don't have to be policy wonks to understand that basic policies that enable them to live a life in a wealthy and moral America, as Ocasio-Cortez says, matter. And they've been a disservice to not have had them all these years.
This was the Joe Lieberman column, who you know, is a sort of like perfect kind of
a healthcare hero.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Joe Lieberman, who said people should vote for Joe Crowley, who's still on the ballot for the Working Families Party, because Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez hurts the party, Congress, and even America. I think one of the things that she does here, which gets this right, which is like, there's always the like, but how are you going to pay for it, right? Or like, oh yeah, it sounds great to like do all this stuff, but like, let's be real. And I think part of the path that has been plowed by the Republicans is like, why are you even going to talk about that?
Right.
Right? Like, why play that game? The president just pulled $12 billion out of thin air to like basically make some cash payments to the farmers. He's screwing with his trade policy. Like, why even play the game?
Right, and I think that also she's has kind of parried that question really well, which is we're laying out a marker for the kind of society that we want to create. Right? I'm not kind of coming to you with a white paper about legislation that I'm going to introduce next year.
I also think
the problem is that the faux concern about the deficit, and we can argue as to whether or not there's money. I mean, they came up with $70 billion a year for the military. We didn't need that. But the notion of the deficit is no longer one of those sort of signifiers, one of those cultural IDs that like guns, God, and,
that's a good point.
It used to be the deficit, and that
got cast aside.
That got cast aside very quickly.
Well, last thing though, I will say here, right? Like, so you know, there's obviously this is someone who's going to probably win, I think, in her district. It's Bronx and Queens, very liberal district, the majority of people of color. You know, you've got like Connor Lamb, and you got people running in very different ways. Like, I'm not quite sold on the idea, right? Like the sort of the thesis here, right? The Bernie like thesis is like, this is universal stuff. You can go out to Kansas and do it. And I'm not quite sold yet that that is true.
Well, what if we look at the fact that Bernie Sanders won every district in the primary in West Virginia? What if we look at how...
But Hillary won Mississippi. Like, that doesn't mean that her brand of politics is viable there.
Well, no, because a general election and a primary election are very different. People are choosing based on pure partisanship in a general election. And I think that being overly dismissive of people on the ground who are articulated a choice for a more progressive vision of the world, who articulated a choice for policies that spoke to their genuine material concerns, is a fool's errand.
Whether it's a fool's errand or not, I'm just saying it is an unanswered question, right? About like I'm going to go run as a socialist in Kansas, and that's going to work.
I think these tensions are somewhat overplayed, right? I mean, every district will sort of choose somebody who's appropriate. I have no opinion about this primary in Kansas. I do know that when I was in Pennsylvania, I met people who worked for both Connor Lamb and also for some of the socialist candidates who won in the state house, and they, they didn't see them as being on opposite sides of some kind of great divide.
Michelle Goldberg, Sam Seder, and Brianna Gray, thank you both for being with me tonight. Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.